Welcome to our podcast, Her Body and Mind. My name's Amanda Sarich.
I'm Dr. Sierra Fox.
So today is going to be the second of our two-part series on what is internal family systems. So last episode, we broke down what is IFS, what's the language, what are all the parts. And then today we're going to talk about what do we do with this? How do we apply this in our real life?
Totally. And if you didn't listen to the first episode, I highly recommend because of the language and the terminology, which we're now going to go over really briefly to kind of give a little recap, but it'll be really helpful and informative. So flip back if you haven't watched it. But yeah, why don't you recap on what are the different parts within interfamily systems briefly?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Briefly. I'm not good at that, but I will try.
Do your best.
So the idea with IFS is that it's duality. We have parts within one system. And in IFS, the main part is, the main piece would be self. So self cannot be impacted, damaged, or destroyed ever. We all have a self. And then exiles are what happens when we've been impacted by life's delightful experiences, whether that's trauma, attachment wounds. Exiles get burdened and pushed away. That's big pain. And then managers work to keep us from feeling that deep pain, keep us from feeling the exiles. And firefighters are there for if the exile does get triggered. So if you do get triggered to feel not good enough, a firefighter which would be like drinking, drugs, sex, the firefighter comes in and like sweeps the system and makes us not feel it.
So essentially you have all these different characters working within you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
All in front of a self. So we have the self, which I'll talk about a ton in this episode.
Okay. So how do we actually start using IFS in counseling and or on our own?
Yeah. So I think the biggest takeaway that's the easiest to start applying, whether or not you subscribe to like IFS being a therapy that's going to work for you, is simply a language shift. So I talked about this a little bit in our last episode, where if anyone's ever worked with me in like a clinical way, if I'm your therapist, you'll know that I'm like really intense about using parts work language in my office.
Like separating the parts.
Yeah, because it creates space. And so instead of saying, I am so anxious, I am such an angry parent, I am not good enough, simply changing that language to say, I am struggling with a part that feels like I'm not good enough. Even that language creates space, and that space creates curiosity. And what we know about IFS is that the self, one of the C's of the 8 C's of self, is curiosity. So as soon as we label it as a part, we're stepping closer into self, we're stepping closer into compassion, and we give ourselves space to respond instead of just let those parts react. We do a bit of unblending just by labeling it as a part.
Right.
And that you don't even have to take all the language and exiles and firefighters and what all that means. Starting to label your experiences or the harder parts of you that you struggle with as parts, that is like huge.
Is it also like, because you talk about space, this idea of space, was it created like the space? Is it created or creating the ability to make you want to even like dip in and learn more about what's going on for people who are more avoidant?
I think yes. But the way I'm talking about space is more, so say I'm in the kitchen with my husband and he's like being kind of annoying.
Yeah.
Maybe a part of me gets a bit triggered by that and I want to get mad. I want to maybe yell or I want to like be snarky with him. Noticing that a part of me is getting really activated by this man. Even that noticing gives me a bit of space from my reaction. It's less automatic.
Right.
So, but it being like, oh, I'm like feeling like really frustrated by him. A part of me is really activated. I wonder what part that is. Already, I'm unlikely to be like.
You're kind of de-escalating yourself a bit just in that moment.
100%.
Yeah. Okay. I get it.
Yeah. And that's like IFS is so much about like nervous system regulation, and it has so many of the same principles in mindfulness. And there's like 100 billion truckloads of research that would support mindfulness as a way to regulate our nervous system.
Totally. And that is just an example of that.
Yeah.
Totally. It's just like one way to go about it.
Yeah.
Totally.
So the most important thing with this, if you take anything from this, is to start noticing your reactions, responses, behaviors as parts.
Well, that sounds like kind of how someone can start using this
Mm,
ish.
yeah.
Why don't you tell us actually, though, more strategically, methodically, how do we go about the stages and steps
Yes.
with IFS?
Okay. So first we would try to figure out like what is it that we're trying to work on. And so we would want to start by noticing the part. So if we're going to talk about, let's say anxiety, because it's pretty common, lots of people have anxiety,
Totally.
labeling a reaction as anxiety or experience as a part that is anxious. So first we try to locate the part. And then we locate it by being like, okay, I'm anxious. And then we'd be like, no, a part of me is anxious. Where do I feel that in my body? So we'd maybe say, like, oh, okay, yeah, I really feel that anxious part in my chest. And then we'd be like, okay. And then sometimes it's helpful to say, like, is there like a visual that goes with that?
Okay. Yeah.
Right. So if I maybe like go inwards, which is a lot of IFS. So IFS is a lot about like IFS meditations. And so it's about going inside and having your system work within itself, which again is very powerful because you can do this all yourself.
Totally.
And it's not like what the therapist or this person thinks it should be. It's like your system will tell you. And so it's stopping, slowing down, noticing the anxiety as a part, which already is creating distance from it.
Yep.
Noticing like, where do you feel it? Because most people feel these things, all things, whether it's like rage, shame, anxiety, we feel it physically.
Totally.
Right?
Yes.
My anxiety loves to hang out in my chest.
Yes.
Right? So where do I feel this? What does it look like? And so people will say a variety of things and they'll always think it's weird or wrong. So they'll be like, I don't know, it's like a spiky blob. And I'll be like, okay, yeah, good. Or they'll
Totally.
be like, it's a little girl, or it's just a fog, or whatever.
Yep.
And again, if you can visualize your part, then you're not your part. And so the idea, the name of the game when working with this or doing an IFS meditation, the goal is always an unburdening. So like I said last time, when you're burdened in a part, you are the part. You are living and breathing that. So if you're burdened by anxiety, that part's, driving the car.
Yeah.
There's nothing you can do with it really. IFS creates space. So step 1, notice the part. Where do you feel it? Is there an image that comes up? There doesn't have to be, because people always be like, nothing's coming up.
Totally.
I'm like, that's cool. Doesn't matter. There's
Yeah.
no wrong here. It's just,
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I just want to say, like, it's kind of connecting you back with your body. I feel like a lot of people are chopped off here. I see this in my practice. And an example for me would be like teens and feeling nauseous in the morning. So they come in with their parents and are like, something's wrong with her stomach. Like there's something really wrong. And then we kind of do the proper workup and take the history, but it ends up being that they're really anxious about going to school or whatever, but that's where
Yes.
they feel it. But a lot of people are just so disconnected with like, they're like, well, I don't have any, I'm not thinking about anything. There's no anxious thoughts whatsoever. I'm not ruminating. It's just this physical feeling. But as soon as you can make that connection with the part, you're like, oh, that feeling's back. I must be anxious. It's kind of backwards from what most people would think. It's like there's anxious thoughts, but they're also just anxious feelings.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I think that if we look at trauma survivors, this isn't simple, right? So saying like, drop into your body and where do you feel that? Most people are disconnected from their bodies, and trauma survivors are really disconnected, especially if your trauma is early childhood sexual abuse or
Totally.
any type of sexual abuse. You've had to disconnect from your body.
Yep.
So this like step 1, connect to the part, sometimes takes a bit.
A lot.
And even in that, reconnecting to your body in a way where we're not pathologizing your anxiety as this like terrible flaw, but simply a part of you trying to keep you safe from curiosity already is a very different way to come at a symptom.
Totally.
Right?
That makes sense.
So that's step 1.
Now, I don't know if this is step 2, but how common is it for a part to step back?
So that's the next thing that would be required. So the next step would be you have to get into self. Okay. So to get into self, you have to make sure that you're grounded in like those 8 C's of self. And this is where it's so critical to understand.
And the 8 C's we talked about in the first episode.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this is why it's so critical to understand what self is and how do you know you're in self?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're not in self, then you can't work with this part, because then you just have 2 parts working together.
Or working at the same time. Ish.
Together.
Okay.
So you'd have a part trying to work with another part. So let's just review self. So self is the idea of the like grounded version of you that is never impacted by trauma.
Okay.
Is never impacted by attachment wounds. So like the 8 C's of self, a few of them are like clear, compassionate, creative, confident, all of those things. And so we ask the question in IFS to discern if we're in self. And the question is, how do you feel towards this part? So step 1, label the part. My part I'm trying to work with is anxiety. I feel it in my chest and it looks like a smoky blob. Okay. How do you feel towards this part?
Okay.
And everyone's like, well, I hate it.
Oh,
Get away from me. Like, blah. That
not
is
in
another.
self.
No.
Not
And
in
that
self.
is so common. And that's another part. So just because we want to come at this from this like compassionate space does not mean our system's going to let us do that. Because actually what we're trying to do goes against what the whole system has been created to do, which is to make us not feel this stuff.
Right.
So this step takes a while.
You're like fighting yourself a bit.
Kind of. And so the example I always use with clients on this is the reason we can't have parts working with parts is my daughter Adeline, you know her. She had like a wolf fear for a while. Wolf, yeah. She thought there was like a wolf in her room.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So the example I use with clients is like if my daughter has a fear of wolves in her room and then I go in as the parent. Now, if I'm in self, I'm grounded, parent, calm, clear. I'm like, babe, like, no, we're good. Like, there's no wolves. Like, we're okay. So sometimes we look around her room, or sometimes we like visualize the wolf in like a tutu with lipstick on, and it makes her laugh and makes it ridiculous.
Yeah.
But if I walk in there not in self,
okay,
if I walk in that room as an 8-year-old and she says, I think there's a wolf in here. And I'm like, holy shit, there is. Oh my God. And I freak out. What's going to happen to that poor little girl?
She's going to get eaten.
She is going to freak out. And that is exactly what happens when parts work with parts. So if your first reaction to your anxiety is like, I hate it, that's just another part. And we have to get that part to step back, which is your question.
Got you.
We have to get that part to step back and then say, okay, now how do I feel about it? So that sounds kind of convoluted and like abstract, and it sort of is.
Yeah.
And that's IFS is tricky to explain. It has to be felt.
Yes.
So I did IFS training for a whole year of training. Every single month went for hours and hours and hours to learn this.
Yes.
And then my like trainer, amazing counselor was like, okay, are you using this, Amanda? And I was like, I don't know, not really. And then he's like, okay, you need to do IFS therapy.
So you can understand it.
And I was like,
then
fine.
you can deliver it. Yeah.
And then I did it. And then I was like, and it like unlocked parts of me that I had been struggling with for a long time.
Totally.
So I know as you're listening to this, it's like, what? Like, and clients say the same thing.
Conceptually, it's very confusing.
And it's abstract, but it's just notice it as a part and then be like, how do I feel about this? And usually your system's like, I hate it. And then this is where it's kind of gets interesting is when we ask the part that hates the anxiety to step back, it's weird that it almost always just does.
Just ask.
You just ask. You ask,
and
your
you
system.
shall receive.
So it's like, how do we feel about this part? I hate it. Okay, can I get that part to step back? And often it will. And then you're like, okay, now how do I feel towards this part? Well, I'm scared of it now. Can we get that part to step back? How do I feel towards it now? Oh, I'm a little bit curious about this little guy. And then it's like, okay, now we go in a different way. And to answer your question, how often do parts step back?
Mm-hmm.
It depends on how much trauma you've had. Like if you have a lot of big T, capital, complicated trauma, just because you have this really lovely therapist who wants you to do this.
Couldn't be her.
It's
not her.
not me. Your system's going to be like hell to the no. And so that
Yeah.
part's like, I'm not stepping back. So then what you do is then you work with the part that's afraid to work with this part, or you work with the part that's angry with this part. And so it gets kind of complicated, but kind of cool.
Yeah.
And then once you're in self, that's the next step.
Okay. And then what's the next step?
The next step is actually working with that part. So the next step is from self grounded, calm space. You get curious and you witness the part. So and this is where, again, I know this sounds weird because it's like you have to sit in it and you have to let thinking parts relax, which is hard.
Mm-hmm.
And then let whatever comes up come up. And people are always like, I'm probably making this up. And I'm like, maybe just go with it. And what happens is, I mean, this is evidence backed. We have like decades of research supporting this, like good research. This is a very effective therapeutic modality, but it seems...
I feel like I now have very clear memories coming up for me personally about actually what my first experience was like with that.
Okay.
Yeah. Interesting. I feel like I was crying a lot.
Yes, absolutely.
I was like, what's happening?
Yes.
Oh,
so
God.
Once you connect with your parts from self, you see the scared, hurt, lonely reactions. So if we're working with a manager, which is what we always want to do, we tend not to want to just go to the exiles, which is like the big pain, the big trauma, the big attachment wounds.
Yeah.
We have to first work with a manager or a firefighter, which I'll talk about next. You have to work with that manager first. So say it's people pleasing or anxiety, then I would notice it. Maybe it's in my chest. It often starts kind of abstract, but as I come at it more from self, it often becomes a little kid, which is really beautiful. And then I would from self work with this part. So I'd ask it questions like, what are you afraid would happen if you didn't do your job anymore? And the answers are really getting us to the exile. So maybe a people pleasing part feels like, if I don't make sure everyone in the room is good, I'm going to be totally alone and abandoned. It's like, okay. Another question that I love is like, how old do you think I am? And the answers are always young.
Yeah. I think I said like 7 or something like that. Even earlier, I think it was like between 5 and 7.
And some parts don't have any language because sometimes we're working with parts that are babies.
Yeah.
And so there's nothing coming up. So this is so beautiful. And so working from self with a manager part, and then you start working with it. So I really love showing young parts that we're adults. So having this young part see that like we're actually a naturopathic doctor who's safe. These are things, but things mean safety. So like you own your own home, like you're a doctor, you have a child. These parts of us that are trapped behind kind of the traumatic wall, that are like exiled and burdened, they're like, what?
I guess I am safe.
Okay. And that's the whole idea. We want parts to turn away from the thing that's scary. Maybe that's everything in the outside world, and turn towards the self. And that's why it's called self-led leadership, is that we can then heal our parts, which again, for trauma survivors who have had no control and bad things have happened, you are in control of this.
Totally.
You can heal it.
I know, at the risk of being a bit vulnerable, a week ago, I had like a bit of a thing come up with my past trauma, and I just broke down. I was watching The Real Housewives of Orange County, or I don't even know what.
Those housewives.
Like what? Watching the trashiest show ever. This is how I unwind sometimes. No judgment. But they were there was a character on the show talking about trauma, and I hear about this stuff all the time. And yet that, for some reason, my body was just ready to like actually like be able to like go back and feel. And it was definitely like this part saying, so I was like uncontrollably crying for like a half an hour, hearing this lady talk about being vulnerable and bringing up her traumatic experience with a partner who was abusive. And I called him out and I was like hysterically, I was like, I can't stop crying. And she was like, went into counselor mode. She's like, you're safe. Like, this is what she's saying right now. And she used like naturopathic doctor as the example. So I thought I'd just share, but I feel like it's relevant to this, really. Very.
Exactly.
Yeah, very.
Because I mean, first I was like, oh my gosh, are we okay? And then it was like, your parts needed to be grounded. And then once we did that, then we could talk more like friends again.
Yeah.
Helpful to have a counselor.
She doesn't
on
often
speed
do
dial.
that, jump into that, but I could tell right away. She was like in her counselor mode. And I was like, I guess that's what I needed. But it was such an odd experience because I don't think that I'd ever let myself feel actually what I went through until probably I was ready to feel what I went through. Maybe because I did feel a bit more safe. I don't even know. Confusing.
But
we'll see.
I would say that because you've done so much work, and we won't talk too much about your story,
No.
but because you've done so much work, your system let you feel that
Totally.
instead of running down here and engaging in some maladaptive coping. You called your best friend, which is vulnerable,
Yeah.
which is connection, which is having compassion for yourself.
Yeah.
Essentially, when you called me, you were activated, but there was self on board, which is why it was so quick for me to like put
100%.
my therapy hat on and then we took it back off, right?
I could tell. It was like, I could tell. It was like just things that I was allowing myself to feel versus like I've experienced very different things to that. But it was good. It was a good release. So
absolutely. And the idea that you have parts and we all do, and feeling them is actually so freaking helpful.
It was good.
So good.
Very good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So working with your parts. And I think that's a good example because if we do get really triggered, there actually isn't space. We have to regulate first. We can't always in that moment be like, what are you trying to tell me to your system? Like you couldn't have done that in that moment. There was too much kind of going on.
No.
So then you would do that after. So maybe then you would look back on this reaction from an IFS model and then be like, what was coming up? What was that? Is that a part? Is that an exile? Is that a manager? And then start being curious, like in that way.
Which is kind of like the next question-ish, which is like, what does this look like in session? So you can even use that example if you wanted, but what does this look like in session?
Yeah. Well, I think first it's notice the part, and then it's, be curious and use the language of part. And then we want to make sure we're in self. So those are two, like step kind of 1 and 2. I think a word on firefighter parts. Is that these are very, very, very different. Okay. So firefighter parts are like reactionary. And what's interesting about firefighter parts, if we look at like addiction, is that we can't extinguish a firefighter part just because we want to without first helping the exile. So a lot of like addiction models, you can't really white knuckle it, I don't think, always successfully.
Are you talking about like AA model?
Yeah, I mean, AA has, I am so pro AA.
So am I, by the way. Love
Absolutely,
AA.
love AA.
Love it.
But I think, and not everyone has access to this or even like the ability in deep addiction, but dealing with what the exile or what the reason is why you initially started engaging in substance use is very helpful.
It's like getting to the root cause is like, where is this coming from?
And if you're in that level of addiction where we're, needing an AA model to get out of it, then we're in a different territory, right? Because then we're in like active addiction. But even just people are in patterns of unhelpful behavior. So like binge eating, and I don't mean that clinical binge eating, just like I'm sad, so I'll eat like a pint of ice cream. I'm sad, so I reach for the wine. Not necessarily addiction, but firefighter-y vibes.
Yeah.
I get upset, so I yell at people. I rage text, that kind of stuff.
Totally.
You have to just notice, this is, this part, and then be like, what are you trying to protect me from here? So instead of maybe reaching for the wine, it's like, what are you trying to protect me from here? And then deciding whether or not you still want to do that or not. And then working with the exile, which is the last phase of this.
Yes.
So it's just firefighters are complicated because it's so intense and there's very little space. And so firefighters are the hardest part to work with. Firefighters don't like to be worked with. Managers, yeah. Exiles, sure, if we've done enough pre-work. Firefighters are tricky.
Crazy. The name is so misleading.
I know. Well, but I think that's the whole mind shift in IFS is that firefighters are meant to protect you. These parts are protecting you.
I guess so.
You feel like terrible. So it's like,
let me do this. Let me put the fire out.
Want a joint?
but there's just not good stuff in the hose.
No, not good stuff in the hose.
Not good stuff in the hose.
But it's like, it's numbing, right? And so when you feel that way, the thing is that exiles don't, and firefighters, none of it. None of our parts feel like the self can handle it.
Right.
Because we're burdened by usually younger ego states. So it just feels like the only way we can navigate this is drugs and alcohol or yelling.
Yeah.
And then the last step, it would be like the treatment. So exile, like healing. So exiles working with those deep core trauma parts is slow. IFS is not a fast therapy. And it's witnessing these exiles and having from self, critical to be from self, having these parts, like having self bear witness to these parts' pain.
Right.
So this looks like holding the child from adult self grounded and being like, you're safe, taking this part and like playing, because maybe this, you never had a childhood, you didn't get to play. This type of thing, according to IFS, takes the exile and allows it to unburden and go back into the system.
Like gives it that piece back or
unburden it. So it's like we're bearing witness to it from self, we're holding it, we're seeing it, and we're unburdening it. And then we have like pretty massive symptom reduction, because if the exile is healed, then the managers don't need to protect this thing that isn't there anymore. And the firefighters don't need to protect the exile. It's a whole thing.
Totally. I feel like I have a very clear memory of part of the process for me in this was I delivered a piece of mail to like particular men in my past that like had, you know what I mean? I'm just like, here, you can take this back.
Yeah.
I think it was part of it. I'm pretty sure somewhere in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So I think, and I don't always practice IFS fully. So I love IFS as a pre-EMDR modality because I find that treating deep, deep traumatic wounds, IFS will not like me saying this, but I find that EMDR is a bit more of an effective modality to get to them because it just sutures those wounds in a different way. I think I can and have done it with IFS, but I think of it a little bit differently, which is not pure IFS by any means. But for some people who love this model, we just use pure IFS too. So there's lots of different ways to kind of interchange this with other modalities. But yeah.
Okay. And then what about like just real life? What does this look like?
Well, I think it's stopping. It's kind of noticing your reactions as parts, being curious how you feel about them. Are you in self? Being curious what this part feels and needs and how old it thinks you are. And then eventually being curious about like what maybe these manager parts are protecting. And that's where sometimes this work it is helpful to work with a therapist who specializes in IFS for that like deeper exile stuff. But like I said in our last episode, Richard Schwartz has a ton of information that's accessible and people do and can do this on their own.
Yeah.
So the book, I said it last time too, Greater Than the Sum of Our Parts on Audible is like a really good introduction to IFS, and he'll walk you through all of this, including exile work. Richard Schwartz has tons of books and audiobooks, and he's on lots of podcasts, and he can work with anyone. Richard Schwartz goes into prisons and works with rapists.
Wow.
Because he sees their behavior as a part.
Right.
He's better than I. I could not do that as a trauma counselor. Nope. But he can, because he's so grounded in his theory that he can work with those really scary, dark parts and then help them heal so that maybe they do less crime. So he's really cool to check out.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think that was like good. Like, I feel like I understand this better than I did the first or part one. Yeah. It kind of tied it together. Just the examples, the structure, saying the parts over and over again. Yeah. Very good.
And it's application. So take this, even if you're like, what? And just next time you have any type of reaction, call it a part and then just sit in it a bit and just get curious what comes up. It doesn't have to have all these moving pieces for it to be like quite powerful in terms of your daily relationship with your internal self.
Totally. Start with step one.
Step one.
Very good.
Yeah. So with this one too, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, insights, anything you want us to talk about next, drop a comment below. I'll answer it. She'll answer it.
Yeah.
You can add some things. Yeah. Thank you so much for listening.
Yeah. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next time.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Please contact your own healthcare providers before you make any changes to your health and wellness protocols related to your body and mind.